relational ministry of influence is to make a call for a relational ministry of what I've called play sharing, which is really, I'm not going to get into it too much here because it's just weird, but it's really a translation of a German word that Dietrich Bonhoeffer used that really framed his whole theology, this idea that really is embedded theologically in the early Reformation, which that God, in and through Jesus Christ, is with and for us. That the whole point of salvation history and the whole point of God's very ministry is to work to bring us back into relationship with God's self. And so the very point of the incarnation is to move God completely with and for us, that it can never be denied again that God stands outside or over and against humanity, because God has become human, that God is actually encountered in and through humanity, the humanity of Jesus Christ. So I'm trying to make a case throughout my work that maybe we should imagine relationships with young people not as for influencing them towards some end, but as for sharing their place, being with and being for them. And that there's something, I think, more legitimately theological about that. And the first step that makes that more legitimately theological, because sometimes I get pushback like, well, what you're saying is just hang out with kids. And what, isn't there something more to it? And in some ways I am just saying, let's just hang out with kids. But there's a difference between just hanging out with kids because you're a lame middle-aged person and you don't have anyone else to hang out with, or because you're trying to influence them towards some end. But there's a difference with really being with and for and seeing another person's humanity and sharing deeply in the human experience and in the human journey together. And that's really, in many ways, what I'm calling for, is that we actually see the humanity of the young people and allow them to see our own humanity and share deeply in each other's lives. And I think that there's a theological argument to be made, a theological argument that I've tried to make, that in that encounter of human person to human person, or what a lot of philosophers and theologians have called the I and the you relationship, that in that Jesus Christ is present. And Bonhoeffer actually says that Jesus Christ exists in between the I and the you. So that literally, a la Matthew 25, what I do unto you, I do unto Christ. That Jesus Christ exists concretely there. So the move towards place sharing isn't just a way of trying to kind of avoid manipulative ministry. It really is a way of imagining where and how God encounters us. So there is something really about discipleship in the midst of that, about following Jesus Christ. And to claim that we encounter God in and through our humanity is to confess with the church that God has become human in Jesus Christ. That what it means to be human and what it even means to relate to young people as a human being is to relate to them as Jesus Christ as a human being, in this empathetic desire to see and to be with and to know and to confront death and to confront suffering. So I think there is an element of discipleship in this. It's really discipleship leads us deeper into each other's lives. It's really interesting that maybe the most famous book on discipleship written in the 20th century was Dietrich Bonhoeffer's Cost of Discipleship, or in German, Nachfolge, which is discipleship. And the book opens with this line where Bonhoeffer says, when Jesus Christ calls a person, Jesus Christ calls a person to come and die. And we usually, as Western kind of late modern people, think of that as a pep talk. This is a contextual example, but in my part of the world, we have football coaches who tend to get their players all fired up for a gridiron match, and they'll walk around and they'll say, we're going to kill these guys this week. That we're going to go out there and we're going to kill them. We're going to tackle them hard and we're going to kill these guys. And no player actually thinks, even though they cheer and are excited, no player actually thinks, oh, what our coach really wants us to do is to murder these people. I mean, they don't take guns out onto the field and do that. They think it's rhetoric used to inspire a certain form of behavior. And I think in youth ministry, we've tended to do that. We've tended to think all this Jesus stuff is important, but we use it to inspire kids towards a certain way of behaving. And it kind of gets disconnected from where the real presence of God actually exists. What we really want them is just to conform and assimilate towards a religious conception and not really wrestle with the presence of God. And so I think the place we start to encounter the presence of God, if we want to follow Bonhoeffer here, is when we pick up our cross and die. Now that sounds morbid and abusive, but really what Bonhoeffer means is it's when we seek for Jesus Christ up against the places in the world where there's death, up against our own experiences of nothingness and question and fear, that up against the cross, where the cross lives inside of us, that is where Jesus Christ is found. Where is our God? Not in a cathedral, standing between an altar and two candles, but on a hill of death outside of Jerusalem, crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me? I mean, that is God, the fullness of God there. As Martin Luther always loved to assert, where is Jesus Christ on the cross, the crucified God? So I think discipleship then becomes this tenacious honesty that seeks for God in your own human wrestlings, in your neighbor's human wrestlings, that it becomes this deep search for where is God, what is God up to. And I think our job as youth workers is to help give young people a framework that helps them interpret where God's action is found, and give them a theological framework to do that, not an esoteric theological framework, but a theological framework that helps them seek for the presence of God. So I think the disciple becomes the one who follows Jesus Christ. And where is Jesus Christ? Jesus Christ is always found suffering with and for the world to take what is dead and bring new life out of it. And I think that becomes the beauty of this. So in some ways, the way we I think move young people into discipleship is by inviting them to dwell deeply in their own story and in their own question, and then to tenaciously together seek for God in that. And sometimes it means living with the silence of God. Sometimes it means saying, I have no idea what's going on here, but I know God will move. I mean, I think there may be two. I think there's two ways to look at this, and that really discipleship exists between two poles. It exists between the pole of despair and of promise.